I feel a lot of gratitude to the Open University. What happened was that I was in school and I was doing quite well. And together with my parents, we were looking for some ways in which I could learn more. And it was the case that the Open University accepts anyone, regardless of whether they have a high school degree or not. And so for this reason, I was able to start taking classes in the Open University starting from 8th grade. And that was really great. And I really liked those classes. It was, how it works. You get books by mail and you send the problem sets. You mail back the problem sets and you go write the exam and you can study whenever you want. And I really like that. And it was possible only because the Open University took me, even though I was a young student without the credentials to study in a regular university.
Mhm.
But then the question of computer science and math and AI. So I would say that, so I think in my case, it was pretty clear that these are the subjects that I was most drawn on, even as an early child, as a young child. And so that's why I studied them at the Open University.
Mm.
It was still a few years before I really set my eyes on AI.
That's great. I mean, sounds like great experience. And did you leverage like remote learning? I mean, like sending over your work, or did you go to physical classes?
There were physical classes, but they would be very infrequent. So I would go maybe once a week or twice
Yeah,
a week.
yeah.
So the great majority of the learning was remote, at my own schedule. And I found that it happened to be a good fit for me. I found that I could just, and the books are very well written too. So it
Mhm.
made it very, you didn't, it was, if the books were less good, it would have been harder.
Yeah,
But I thought the books were very good. And but for that reason, it was very possible to just read them slowly, do the exercises. And that's all you needed.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so moving from the past to the present, let's talk about OpenAI. So, what were the main reasons for you to establish OpenAI?
So at the time, maybe a year before we started OpenAI, I was a researcher at Google and I was working on deep learning. And I was having a lot of fun. I was really enjoying my time at Google, doing research there and working with the people, with my colleagues at Google. But the thing which I felt already then in 2014 and 2015 is that the future of AI is going to be much, is going to have so maybe for a little bit of context, AI research has strong academic roots.
Yeah,
It means that all of the AI was done in university departments. It was done by professors with their grad students, almost entirely. There's also been some AI being done in companies, but I would say that for the most part, the majority of the most exciting work came from universities. And then back in the day, that was the only successful model. And that was also the model that Google has adopted, where you have an environment that is similar to the university environment, where you have small groups of researchers working together on a project. And already then, I felt that that's not the future. I felt that the future would be much more, much larger and much more organized engineering projects, because it was clear that AI was going larger with larger neural networks and larger, like more GPUs, which in turn means more engineering.
Uh-huh.
The stack gets very complex. It becomes very difficult for a small group of people to do something, like a very small group of people to complete a big project like this. Teamwork is required. And that was one of the reasons. And so I was kind of sitting at Google and feeling a little bit restless, but I didn't know what to do about it. So I was feeling a bit like it wasn't quite right. And then one day, basically, like, so kind of picture this. Here I am, daydreaming, like it was daydreaming that maybe I could start an AI company, but it really wasn't clear how I would do it. How would you possibly get the money for such a thing? Those things would be expensive. There was a daydreaming element to it, but I didn't really think very seriously about it because it was obviously impossible. And then one day I received an invitation to get dinner with Sam Altman and Greg Brockman and Elon Musk. And here I am sitting, getting dinner with these amazing people. And mind you, it was a cold email. They just reached out to me and said, hey, let's hang out, essentially.
How did they reach
Talking
out to
about
you?
email.
Email, like
Just an email. You receive an email and say, hey, like we're getting dinner. Do you want to join?
yeah, it sounds like in that context, it sounds like phishing or some malicious email because it's so extreme.
No, I mean, but it was definitely not that. It was very clearly authentic, but it was a little bit, for me, it was a small moment of, wow, that is so amazing. So of course I went, and here I was at a dinner and they were discussing how could you start a new AI lab, which would be a competitor to Google and to DeepMind, which back then had absolute dominance. And that was the initial conversation. Then it was, of course, for me to leave Google, it was quite a difficult decision because Google was very good to me. It was a very good place to be in. But eventually, I decided to leave Google and to join and create OpenAI. And ultimately, the idea of OpenAI is to take the idea of AGI seriously. It's the idea is to take, like, because when you are a researcher, researchers are somehow, I would say, trained to think small. I think researchers, due to the nature of the work, small thinking gets rewarded because you have these problems and you're trying to solve them all the time, and it's quite hard to make even small steps. So you're just focused on what's coming at you, the next step, and it's harder to see the bigger picture. But at OpenAI, we took the liberty to look at the big picture. We asked ourselves, okay, where is AI going towards? And the answer is AI is going towards AGI, towards an AI which eventually is as smart or smarter than a human in every way. And you think about that and you go, wow, this is a really profound, that is a very profound thing. And so with OpenAI, we thought that it made the most sense to give it the explicit goal to make AGI benefit all of humanity. Because this technology is just going to be so transformative. It's going to turn everything upside down on its head. Whenever there is such a big change, who knows what's going to happen? So for this reason, the goal of OpenAI is not only to develop the technology, but also to find a way to make it as beneficial as possible, to make it benefit all of humanity. And so the combination of those big ideas and those incredible people that were at that dinner, despite all the difficulties that Google has put in front of me to leave, I still decided to go for it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been now more than 7.5 years, and it's been a very exciting and gratifying journey.
Thank you for being so honest and open with us. We really appreciate it. So, back in the days when people talked about machine learning, it was more about finding, small patterns and maybe find some statistical a statistical, a statistical pattern within the data for very specific problems. So you had a model for computer vision, you had a model for language, and you had a model for this and a model for that. But here you are talking about general intelligence. And can you identify the moment when you said, this technology, this neural networks can be used for multiple problems, for multimodal sensing? There can be something that can be general enough. Because back in the days when we were limited by the hardware capabilities that we had, before the age of the GPUs and or everything, it was pretty limited to specific domains. But when was the time that you said this is going to be big? This can get seriously in the field of general intelligence?
To go ahead and start OpenAI, it was a bet on deep learning. It was a bet that somehow with deep learning, we will figure out how to make smarter and smarter AIs. So in some sense, the creation of OpenAI was already an expression of this bet, of the idea that deep learning can do it. You just need to believe. And in fact, I would argue that a lot of deep learning research, at least in the past decade, maybe a bit less now, has been about faith, about rather than inventing new things, just believing that the technology, that the deep learning technology can do it. But now I want to talk about the question, and you said, and one, I want to explain just a bit why I think it's not quite the right question. So you asked, when did it become clear that a neural network could be general and can do many tasks, which in some sense is what we are moving towards. But I would argue that this is the less important dimension. The more important dimension is that of capability and competence, rather. Is the neural network competent? You can have a specialized language neural network, or you can have a language and image neural network. But is it actually good? If it's not good, then it's not interesting. So the question is not whether deep learning can be general, but whether it can be competent. And what we are seeing now is that deep learning can indeed be competent.
Maybe you can take us a little bit into your journey in the development of this large-scale neural network that you worked in. I mean, where did you start, and how it was evolved over the years to become GPT-3 and GPT-4?
It's a long story with many interlocking parts. I'd say the evolution has gone. The story of deep learning can be seen as quite an old story, maybe a 70-year-old story. Back in the 40s, researchers have already started to think about the ideas that were later to become the genesis of deep learning. It is the idea of the artificial neuron. You see, the human brain is big in a sense that it has 100 billion neurons. And the human brain is also, at least until or arguably still, the best example of intelligence that exists in the universe. So then you can start asking yourself the question of, okay, so what is it about the brain that makes it smart? Well, maybe if you had a lot of neurons arranged in a certain correct way, you would get intelligence. And so then you can ask yourself, what's a neuron? So biological neurons have lots of complicated behaviors, but the idea that the scientists from the 40s had is maybe you can simplify those biological neurons down to something which would be their essential computation, something which is called the artificial neuron. And it is very simple. It's just a simple mathematical formula. And then they started to ask questions like, what can you do with these artificial neurons? How can you arrange them? What kind of little programs they can run? what kind of functions they can compute. But this was just the first step. This was the first big step. First big step was to invent the artificial neuron. The second big step was to discover how these neurons can learn even in principle. One of the obvious things about human intelligence and also animal intelligence is that we learn. We learn from experience, and we learn and we generalize, and this is the basis of us succeeding in the world. So how does learning work? It's not, right now we are used to the idea that computers can learn, obviously. But I would say that even in the year 2003, when I started working on machine learning in Toronto, it wasn't clear that learning can be successful. There haven't been really successful examples. And so a very big discovery was an equation of learning in neural networks, a mathematical equation that tells you how to change the synapses of the neural network so to incorporate the experience. But it was just an idea. It wasn't a proven idea.